What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining me on these analysis. We're going to be looking at MSTR, Bitcoin today, MSTX, and just talking about long-term investing, dollar cost averaging into portfolios, trying to keep it simple for a long-term mindset so you can set yourself up for success in this market. So let's get straight into it. We're here on the Bitcoin chart right now. We're currently sitting at 107,735. We had our weekly close above this key level of support. We had a pullback to around 105.077, and it looks like we're getting a bounce off of that level. But when you zoom in a little bit further, it looks like we are falling back into this downward sloping trend line. So it looks like we found resistance off of this key level of support and resistance, and now we're pushing back to the zone. So we still have 2 hours and 50 minutes for the day to close. So let's see if we can actually turn this back into a wick and get that bounce, and then continue chopping and retesting this region, eventually breaking out. The more we touch something, the weaker it gets. So ideally we want to see this turn into a wick, and then we chop and continuously touch it until we finally break this wick, and then we can finally make our way up to that region of around 112. Right now, Bitcoin is building a bit of momentum. As you can see here, we have a nice upward sloping trend line from pretty much about June 22nd or so. You can see it's pretty steep. Now, sometimes when you get steep like that, you can get a steep fall off. When you break, retest, it can push down really quickly. So we'll see how it plays out. We also do have to keep in mind, we have to be on the lookout for an inverse head and shoulders, saying like this could be the shoulder, and then maybe the head is being formed right now. Retest, and then maybe we push up to this zone again. Maybe we form a lower high or something like that, and then we fall off. Something to take into consideration, of course, if you have a long-term mindset and you dollar cost average in, it won't really matter to you. We are still thinking about the same price targets that we've been speaking of, which were these bull flags, which was this first one here. That takes you to around that 145, 150 region, somewhere along there. And then also, what we noticed recently was if you pull a bull flag here from this bull flag and you measure it to the bottom, it still takes you to the same region. So it's a completely different bull flag, but it points to the same area. And then on a smaller time frame, we have been talking about touching this level here around that 117 or so level. So we'll see if we can get to that point, hopefully break through it, and we don't find too much rejection, and we can have a solid move to the upside. And hopefully you guys can continue to accumulate as we continue on. Hopefully we see higher prices. We are kind of expensive for Bitcoin right now. But like I said, if you have a long-term mindset and you believe like in the power law and all that kind of stuff, then you should feel pretty comfortable still purchasing at this price with the anticipation of it going up over the next 5 to 10 years. And you just DCA into the portfolio. So if we were to hit that target of 150 or 145, that would be somewhat of a 36 to 40% move. We'll just say 40 to make it simpler. And we're going to do that same move on MSTR. Or actually what we can do is we can just take the exact same move that we had for this first leg here, which I believe it was on a 40% move on Bitcoin, and MSTR did around 88%, and that would take us to around 658. So if we take that move from there, that would put us at around, that'd be a 64% move from here. If we were to take that for Bitcoin, 64, we just divide it by 2. So we'd be sitting around 142, for instance. If you look at that 140 region, we'll just look at 142 here, and you take 985. When you take 985 and you subtract it by 15%, it gives you 837. And when you take 985 and you add 15%, you get 1132. So that could be your range potentially. So anywhere from 800 to 1100 if we were to see a move to 142 on Bitcoin according to this model. And that's a deviation of 15% to the downside and 15 to the upside. As you can see here, we are undervalued. We're deviating to the downside by 15%. So that's why I do the deviation, because most of the dots stay within that 15 range. Of course, we have seen larger deviations of 20, 25%, but it's just a guideline more than anything. So, and if that were to happen and we had a 64% move and you just multiply it by 2, you're talking about 128% move here on MSTX potentially. And you can also do the same thing on MSTU. They're the exact same thing. They're just by a different company. So you can take these numbers and put it on MSTU. Also, if we were to see that initial move that we're talking about, where if we actually touch this gray dotted line up around August, that would be around an 80% move on MSTR. And if you take that, that would be 160% on MSTX. That's just doing a clean 2x move, which obviously is not the case. So you can see it take you to 103. But when we compare the last legs, you can see that from this move up here, you went up around 380, 370%, something around there. And then when you look at MSTX from the bottom, you can see that you went up around 1370, which is well over a 2x move. So that's my point. I just want you guys to know that sometimes it does multiply quicker than you can really anticipate. You'll think it's only going to be 2x, but it ends up being 2.5, 3x if you really get a nice, aggressive, consistent move. What we have been seeing on MSTR has not been consistent. It's just been consistently sideways. We haven't seen a consistent uprising in price. So if we can see something like that, where we get a 7-8 week consistently green week after week area, then that's when you can open yourself up to those high multipliers on MSTR, MSTX, and so on. Also, now we're going to be looking at what would happen if you were to dollar cost average and kind of build your portfolio for long-term growth. And you know, you're trying to build yourself a portfolio for financial freedom and set yourself up for a nice, lump sum of money where you can kind of diverge that money into safer, less risky assets, if you will. So we're going to use VUG as example 1, which is a high growth ETF by Vanguard, Bitcoin for portfolio 2, and MSTR. We did something similar prior, and when you populate it together, you have you start with $10,000 in 2020, at the beginning of 2020, and you take it all the way up to 2025, and you're adding $1,200 a month. It gives you something like this, where you can see VUG, you're sitting on 170, Bitcoin, you're sitting on $500,000, and MSTR, you're sitting on $1.3 million. And if you can see here on the right hand side, S&P 500 would have given you about 155, 160,000, roughly speaking. And you can see all the numbers here. You can see the max drawdown. You can actually see MSTR's drawdown was pretty similar to Bitcoin, but you got that additional leverage to the upside, which is pretty interesting when you look at the numbers. It's only a 7% more of a drawdown for the max drawdown. So that's pretty interesting to see. But you ended up getting over 2x of what Bitcoin ended up doing over that 5-year time period. So hopefully that can continue. And if we were to dollar cost average into any of these instruments, you can see how that would have turned out for you, usually pretty well. A 4 to 5 years time span in Bitcoin or MSTR seems like it should pan out pretty well for you, at least in Bitcoin. MSTR is still relatively new to the crypto space. Once we can get like another 5 years, then I feel like we can really say that it's more established and we have a better feel for it. But I still think it will do pretty well. And if you have a nice blend between the two, you should do pretty well by 2030. By the end of the next cycle, 2029 or so, around that area, you should be up a lot if you're dollar cost averaging and keeping your head down, staying focused, staying locked in. That's all I have for you guys. Make sure you guys like and subscribe if you guys enjoy content like this. Share with a friend, and I'll see you guys in the next one.